One crisp morning in Arendelle, when frost traced lace across the window panes and the fjord outside steamed like a silver kettle in the rising sun, a small white dove arrived at Elsa's sill carrying a ribbon the color of twilight. Anna, midway through a piece of toast, squealed with delight and rushed to the window while Elsa smoothed the paper with a careful, practiced hand. The letter inside was written in a neat, earnest script and sealed with the sunburst crest of Enchancia. It was from Princess Sofia. The message said her amulet of Avalor had begun to shiver and murmur at night, whispering of an old mirror in a tower that promised impossible comforts but left the castle strangely hushed, servants forgetting their chores, laughter thinning into a cautious silence, and singers losing the courage to sing. Sophia's words were polite and steady even as they trembled with worry. She asked, with the gentle persistence of someone who had tried everything else, if Elsa and Anna could come. Elsa read the lines aloud, and Anna, who could not abide the idea of a friend being afraid, declared that no one in their kingdom would be allowed silence when it could be filled with song. They packed scarves, biscuits, and Olaf's favourite hat, and set their course for Enchancia, hearts already leaning toward the problem like hands reaching for a lantern in the dark. The crossing to Enchancia felt like one of those stories Anna loved, full of small, bright moments stitched between long, cold expanses. Elsa made a ribbon of ice over the waves so smooth that their sled skimmed as though flying. Gulls dipped and cried, and Christoph waved them off with a grin, offering Sven 2 extra carrots if a luck. Olaf insisted on coming and recited dramatic vows about being a small but very brave, which made Anna laugh until she cried. The sea air smelled of salt and adventure, and as the sisters rowed, Elsa hummed a low tune she'd learned from the wind and Anna sketched plans on a scrap of paper for what they might do when they reached the tower. Along the way, Elsa watched the horizon with a queen's steadiness, thinking about how magic could be a comfort and a burden at once, while Anna thought about how being loved sometimes felt like being in a crowded room where your voice might get lost. She resolved quietly that no voice would be lost on her watch. Together they talked of old friends and new lessons, of how courage arrives in small packages, and by the time Enchancia's lavender-tinted spires peeked over a hillside, both sisters felt ready for whatever waited inside the castle's hush. Enchancia was softer than Arendelle in many ways. The stone had the warm tone of baked bread, windows were hung with curtains that smelled faintly of cinnamon, and the gardens grew herbs and flowers that leaned toward conversation. On the great steps stood Princess Sofia, smaller than the courtiers but with a presence that made the air honest. Her violet gown was simple and clean, and her amulet of Avalor lay against her throat like a glowing promise, its light dimmed to the color of dusk. Sofia greeted them with a smile that trembled at the edges because worry had made it brittle. She explained, carefully, that the hush began after an enchanter visited with a gift, an ornate mirror sent as a token of friendship, the kind of thing ambassadors whisper about with shifting eyes. At first the mirror had seemed harmless, even kind, showing gentle visions meant to comfort a monarch's loneliness. But then people started to forget words in the middle of sentences, to pause in doorways as if some part of them had wandered away, and songs once bright as summer had thinned into polite hummings. Sophia's fingers strayed to the amulet when she spoke of the nights she heard it whisper, a soft voice promising perfect confidence and unassailable praise. She asked them to find the mirror and, if they could, to stop the quiet before it became permanent. Elsa listened with the calm of someone who measures storms by the way the trees bend. Anna's face tightened like a fist made to hold hope, and both promised to go to the tower at once. The tower rose from the oldest part of the castle like a memory that took up too much space. Its stairs spiraled in shadows where dust had learned to sleep, and vines had threaded themselves into the stone until they seemed to be fingers. As they climbed, the air cooled in a way that wasn't simply temperature. It felt like the hush itself had taken to the stairs, pressing a finger to the lips of the corridor. Old portraits watched them go with eyes made dim by many years of polite silence. and cobwebs draped across banisters like the sleep of 100 quiet afternoons. When they reached the chamber at the top, they found the mirror standing on a pedestal swathed in velvet, its frame carved with tiny faces, some laughing, some sobbing, as if the maker had tried to catch every kind of human expression and failed. But the glass was the oddest thing. It didn't show the room reflected but instead painted pictures of the heart. A banquet where everyone in the hall cheered wildly for an unseen person, a stage where an actor's voice never cracked, a throne where crowns settled without burden. The mirror's visions were gentle and flattering and terrible because they felt, for a breath, truer than truth, and the hush in that room was like a held breath waiting to be told a story that never ended. Stepping closer, Elsa, Anna, and Sofia felt the soft pull of the mirror the way leaves feel a current under the water, gentle but inexorable. For Elsa, it offered a kingdom where no one ever feared her magic. There she watched people move without a second shadow of worry. For Anna, it showed a life where she would never dread loss, never face the cold ache of saying goodbye to someone she loved. The image was warm as a hearth. For Sofia, it unfurled the easiest of comforts, a voice that would never tremble, never squeak or stammer, a voice that would command rooms and never be doubted. These were small, closable doors to relief, and in that instant they all understood why anyone might be tempted to step through. Anna's chest tightened. She could feel the pull like a tide, and she said aloud, sharp and honest, that the mirror did not show what was but rather what it thought would please. The mirror flatters, as she told them. Even flattering is not always kind. Sometimes it is just a soft trap. Elsa touched the glass with only the tip of a finger and felt it ripple like water that held other lives beneath. A small chill slid along her skin, not like frost she knew to make, but like a winter that empties laughter out of rooms. The sisters looked at each other, and for the first time the hush seemed less like a mystery and more like a hunger. The hush itself was not only silence, it had an intention. As the mirror's images swelled, a thin, grey wind bled from the glass and wound through the room. It spoke in voices that were almost compliments. You are so capable, so perfect. But there was a coldness behind them that felt like a hollow. The hush did not shout. It suggested, it coaxed, and its softness made it harder to resist. People whose hearts longed for praise might slip inside its suggestions and not even notice what they had traded away: the right to mess up, to learn, to be imperfect and human. Sofia's amulet responded with a tremor of light, and she clutched it like an anchor. Olaf, who had been bravely pretending to be a hero, squeaked and hid behind Anna's skirts, muttering that he did not like the sound of whispers that sounded like compliments. Anna, steadying Olaf with a hand on his twiggy shoulder, called out the memory of 1,000 times they had chosen to be brave precisely because they could be afraid. Her voice, bright and unpretentious, stung the hush like sunlight through fog. Elsa listened, really listened, and found that there was a melody in Anna's simple words that did not flatter but named what was real: courage, clumsiness, joy, and the stubborn, human habit of trying again. Knowing the hush must be contained, Elsa moved with the grave grace of someone who understands the line between protection and prison. She raised her hands and spun a delicate lattice of ice around the mirror's frame, not to seal the glass away forever, but to steady it and to give it boundaries. The ice did not aim to destroy the mirror's possibility of beauty. Rather, it forced the mirror to face what it showed rather than push what it wanted. The lattice shimmered, threaded with runes Elsa shaped carefully from her memories of protection, of parents who loved in ways that taught rather than smothered. Yet even with the ice, the hush beat against the barrier like wind against a door, and its whispers grew sharper, more insistent, promises polished into compulsion. Anna stepped forward and shouted, not to scare the hush but to name what she loved aloud, the small, ridiculous things about her friends that made them whole, their mistakes, the way Olaf hummed off key, the way Elsa's quiet could be as wide as winter and as kind as a wool blanket. Naming truth like that was a small weapon, but it worked. It sowed warmth in a cold place and proved contagious, for Sofia's amulet brightened an answer, as if each honest word fed it a little more. When the mirror tried its trick most cruelly, showing Sofia the perfect voice like a sparkling object just out of reach, Sofia surprised them all. She closed her eyes and remembered the nights her voice had stumbled in front of guests, how she had swallowed tears of embarrassment and then apologized for them, and how her friends had loved her anyway. "My voice is mine," she said, not loudly but with a steadiness that carried, and it will wobble. It will squeak when I laugh and quake when I'm nervous, and that is how people know I am trying. Her amulet flared as if cheering her on, and in that light Anna felt something settle in the room like a warm foot on a cold stone. Elsa, seeing Sofia's courage, leaned into her magic, not to fix hearts so they would never crack, but to restore the right shape of reflection. She braided the draft in the room into a spiral of glittering stillness that revealed what the hush truly was, not a friend but a feaster on fear, a thin, grey thing that had grown full by whispering what people wanted to hear and taking from them the messy, necessary parts of being human. Anna, quick as ever with mischief and courage both, flung a curtain over the hush in an old, brave gesture that turned it from a storm into a thing only worth pity. The hush rattled against the cloth like a ghost that had lost its costume. Together they worked as a small, fierce community. Elsa laced the mirror's rim with runes asking it to show her what is here and nothing more. Anna told the hush of all the little things she cherished about others. The jokes, the arguments, the help asked for and given. And Sofia commanded the amulet to guide truth toward truth. The mirror resisted with the last of its silvered glamour, displaying the most tempting versions of their lives. But truth has a stubborn, quiet light and it will outlast glitter when given a chance. When the mirror finally turned its face upon itself, robbed of flattery and forced into honest reflection, it revealed not power but emptiness, a cracked, ordinary surface that had been pretending with borrowed shine. The hush, seeing itself reflected without flattering gloss, crumbled like brittle paper and slid away in a soft, noiseless rain of grey slivers. The amulet's light steadied into a bright, calm star, and the castle's long-held breath whooshed out in laughter that felt like spring breaking through ice. They wrapped the mirror in cedar from Enchancia and fir from Arundel, carved along its frame a reminder, a show what is, not what is wanted, and set it in a gallery where people could practice looking and naming without trickery. That evening the castle was full of warmth. Tables groaned with cardamom cakes and steaming mugs of cocoa, lanterns swung in the garden, and Olaf did his best to retell the day's events with added drama and a few invented heroics that caused everyone to chuckle. Sofia hugged Anna and kissed Elsa's cheek, thanking them for more than the breaking of a curse. She thanked them for staying in the hush with her and pointing, gently but firmly, at the things that mattered. Anna promised to visit soon, and Elsa, who had felt the pull of the mirror like a chill, smiled with an ease that was quieter but no less joyful than her sister's. They decided the mirror would remain where it was, visible, but taught to reflect truth, and that the amulet would be kept close by their new friend, not as a weapon but as a reminder of courage and careful speech. As moonlight silvered the towers and the stars turned watchful eyes, the sisters mounted their sled and turned toward home, Olaf curled up between them and Sofia waving from the steps. In the hush of the road, Anna hummed a tune about brave little things. Elsa answered with a wind that sounded like applause, and both of them carried with them the knowledge that helping someone find their own voice is a kind of magic that never goes out of style.